Chris, back on your screens again, and today we're going to be running you through my favorite push workout. Now, I'm not going to run you through my warm-ups once again, but if you were interested in checking out how I do my warm-ups pre-resistance training, go over and have a look at the pull workout I uploaded. I'm going to leave a link down below, or just find it somewhere on the channel. So when we talk about push, right, we're referring to the chest, the shoulders, and the tricep, because these are the usual muscles that you're going to be using to push things from day-to-day life. Starting off with the dumbbell incline press. Now, one of my all-time favorite exercises for a number of different reasons, but when we talk about an incline press, right, we always want to make sure that the bench is set up correctly. Anything too high and we start to incorporate a little bit too much shoulder, and anything too low, you might as well just be doing a flat press to begin with. So there's a number of reasons why I absolutely love the dumbbell incline press, but the primary reason is because when you put it up against the bench press, the range of motion that you can get from the two free moving dumbbells is a little bit deeper than it is over on the traditional bench press. For instance, when you are hitting that bench press, the bar will eventually hit your chest, and that is going to limit your range of motion. Whereas with the dumbbell, there is no limiting factor of a bar crossing your chest, meaning you can get a lot of a deeper stretch within this movement. When performing the dumbbell incline press, there's not a huge amount of things to think about. However, I'm going to give you a few quick tips just so that you can perform this exercise correctly. A lot of people, when they're doing the incline press, they use a form like this. Now, to the naked eye, there's nothing overly wrong with this press. However, like we discussed before, because we have two individual moving dumbbells, we can manipulate them to get a little bit of a better squeeze at the top of the rep. So the chest's main job is to bring the arm into the center point of the body. So we're going to make sure that we use this within this exercise. So Dean, what I want you to do is, instead of pressing straight up, I want you to press up and pull the two arms into the middle. As we can see here, now we have a little bit more of a deeper range of motion and a higher point of contraction within this movement. Definitely one I want you to get right, because if you've been bench pressing for a long period of time, you might just do this out of habit and aren't even aware that you're doing it incorrectly. All right, Dean, driving all the way up for one. Give me a 3, 2, 1, and again, driving up through the middle, bring the two hands into the center point, we have reached peak contraction. Unbelievable. The two other key points that I want you to be aware of is, as Dean goes through the eccentric and concentric part of the motion, is that his elbows are directly under the resistance. Driving up for one. This is going to allow him to keep stability through the whole movement, and it allows his chest to be the primary mover within this exercise. The final tip I want to give you when performing an incline dumbbell press is, as we can see here, Dean has stopped in what would be his limiting range of motion if we had a barbell press. As you can see, the bar would travel across the chest, and his chest would be his limiting factor because the bar would make contact. However, Dean, we can get a little bit deeper here. I want you to really drop down, and we can really feel the stretch across the pectoral muscles. Driving up again for one. Nice contraction again for the squeeze, and give me a nice 3, 2, 1, sinking his elbows right down, getting a full stretch across the chest, allowing for a little bit more juice to be squeezed out of every single rep. Then we arrive at the dumbbell shoulder press. Now, some people prefer to stack all of their chest exercises together and then transition to the shoulders. Now, I'm in favor of stacking the compound exercises first. If I was to leave an exercise like this towards the end of my session, you'd run the risk of not being able to perform this to my absolute max, and then you could also argue that stability within the movement might be hindered as well. When performing the dumbbell shoulder press, a lot of similarities transition over from the dumbbell incline press as well. So the main priority we want to make sure is that our elbows are kept under the point of resistance, which is the dumbbells in this case, making sure that we have stability through all the movement. Second to that, Dean, I want you to press up over the head. Similar again, the dumbbells are to come together at the top of the rep, right? We don't want to clash them at the top of the rep like an amateur. We just want to make sure that we're getting a peak contraction to the shoulder, which means bringing them up together from an end point. Coming down again for a 3, 2, 1. Now, what Dean has done here, right, is I want you to bring your arms up to parallel. Up, 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 right, boom. His arms, right, are now parallel to the floor. A lot of people stop here when they're looking in the mirror, but again, similar to the dumbbell incline press, we can get a little bit more juice out of every single rep. So Dean, like you just did there, I want you to sink right down into the movement, anywhere there, just below that parallel point, allows the shoulder to stretch a little bit more through the movement. This is a little tip that I want you to be aware of, and is actually a really hard one to spot. Again, Dean is performing the shoulder press quite nicely here, but there's one major flaw, and that is he's not fighting gravity one-to-one. If you can actually see the pathway of the dumbbells, they're leading off in front of the head, and you will actually not notice this if you have a straight-on look. So if you have a mirror in the gym, always try and use that side point of view as well, because Dean, I want you to drive the dumbbell straight up over the head. This is us fighting gravity one-to-one, meaning our shoulders are going to be working to its maximal load. Again, this is a very tricky one to catch when your eyes on the prize head on with the mirror. So it's not a bad idea to have a look at yourself through different angles when performing this exercise. While adding a secondary compound for the shoulder isn't actually a bad idea, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'd back you if you went ahead with it. However, in my opinion, and what I like to do is I like to hit the shoulder a little bit more so through an isolated means, meaning I like to isolate the lateral head and the rear delt just that little bit more so, and allows me to focus on really breaking down the shoulder itself without introducing the tricep and so on and so forth. As well as that, the shoulder or the delts are a much smaller muscle in comparison to the chest, and this is where a lot of people get wrong. They do equal parts volume to the chest as they would do to the shoulder, but again, if you just even take a look at the shoulder versus the chest, it's so much smaller and requires a little bit less volume than the chest does itself. For the shoulder isolations, I have a superset going on between the face pull and the lateral raise. Now, the reason I do a superset isn't because of anything fancy or optimal, it's just simply just to save a bit of time, and I prefer to do so. When we talk about the face pull is considered a pull exercise. Now, you might be asking, why are you going to do a pull exercise on your push days? Well, with the rear delt, it's a little bit of a tricky one to hit, and I like to hit it a couple of times a week, just on the basis of I'm overstimulating the front hand side. Ask yourself the question, and I know the answer to it already. Have you ever been in the gym and had a little twinge in your shoulder and went, oh God, that must be my rotator cuff? Yeah, me too. And the reason is because you're overstimulating the anterior chain of the body, which is a fancy term for everything we do in life happens from the front. I drive my car from the front, I write my book from the front, I wave to you at the front, I'm benching at the front. A lot of the activities we do as human beings happen from the front hand side. So what happens over time is the anterior or just the front hand of the shoulder begins to overstimulate, and you end up overcompensating, which means the one at the back gets left behind. And with that, the anterior delt or the front portion of your shoulder becomes overdeveloped, bringing everything forward, leading to that shoulder impingement that I know you have. So yes, the face pull is considered a pulling exercise, but it is still within the region of the shoulder, and that's why I try and throw it in a little bit more often. On top of that as well, when we trained our shoulder press movement via the dumbbell press, the main movers are going to be the tricep and the shoulder, but within the shoulder, the bias moves towards the anterior and the lateral heads within this movement, meaning again, the posterior head gets left behind. To compensate for this, that is why I throw in my face pulls on my push days. The main tip I want you to understand when performing a face pull is to make sure that when the elbows are pulling, you want the elbows flaring up the way and not down the way. If we have our elbows focused downwards, you're going to introduce the back a little bit more so, and that's not the objective of this exercise. The lateral raise is one of the most commonly used exercises in the gym because it's a fucking great one, and there's a good reason for it. It gives a good width on the shoulder. Everyone wants that V taper with those wide shoulders, and this is the key to that problem. With the dumbbell lateral raise, there's not a huge amount for yourself to get wrong. Now, I'm not going to treat you like an absolute fool, and I'm going to just take it for granted that you're not swinging your dumbbells up and down like an absolute numpty. But there's just a couple of cues that I want you to be familiar with. First and foremost, when performing this exercise, I want you to think of the T for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want you to come up and I want you to make a capital T. With this, I want you to think about pouring that nan of yours a cup of tea. So what I mean by that is, as the arm begins to reach that parallel to the floor, I want you to tilt it slightly, as if you're pouring her a good cup of scald. You should end up in the position with your pinky finger slightly elevated over your thumb, and this is going to make sure that the peak contraction is coming through the shoulder and not through other means in the body. I then move into my secondary and final chest compound. I've chosen to go with the cable flat press. I like this exercise because it gives me a consistent resistance with the cables. However, you can't really go too far wrong picking a different press of choice. My only recommendation with this one is we've already hit an incline press via the dumbbell inclines earlier on. So if you are going to introduce a secondary compound, make sure you manipulate the incline of the bench, whether it be a flat or a decline, or even some variation of a dip. Try not to hit another incline press because, as Einstein says, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Then we arrive at the only chest isolation of the push workout, and that is the chest fly via the cables. Now, when it comes to chest flies, again, it doesn't really matter. In my preference, cable fly or machine fly are going to be your best ones to choose from. And the reason being is when we do a dumbbell fly, at the top portion of the rep on a dumbbell fly, there's little to no resistance. With the cables and a machine, you get a constant tension through the movement. I was just about to show you some practical tips when it comes to the cable fly, but I'm after making shite of the cables, so I'm going to try and mimic it just without the cables. When we're doing the cable fly, the main point that you want to try and be aware of is the momentum you can generate via a little bit of momentum thrust. To combat this, you can always do it sitting down. That's going to take the legs and the lower portion out of it completely. As well as that, just making sure that, similar to the dumbbell incline press, that we allow the arms to come right into the center point of the body, allowing for that peak contraction through the chest. What the fuck is this shit, man? Are you joking me?
Do it.
Yeah, man, come on. Do the collab, brother. You want to collab? You want to collaborate for the gram? Is that recording, is it? Behind the scenes job that, yeah? My first out of 3 tricep exercises is the tricep dip. When we talk about a tricep focused dip, we're in a very upright position, meaning the elbows are going to be flared behind the body, and this is going to bias the triceps over the chest. Now, Dean, I'm going to get you to lean very much forward. Now we've introduced what we call a chest bias dip. This, my friend, is going to introduce a lot more chest activation over the triceps. So depending on what muscle group you're trying to target, make sure you know the difference. Next up, we have the classic, the cable tricep extension. Now, you can use a bar, you can use a rope, it really doesn't matter. It's ultimately up to yourself, whatever you feel most comfortable using. With this one, again, my starting position comes with my 2 elbows pinned beside the body on this one. From here, we're looking to pull the rope straight down, and we actually want to pull the rope apart. This is going to allow my arm to straighten fully, and like we learned earlier on, when I fully extend my arm, that is my tricep in its contracted position. The final tricep exercise we have is the skull crusher. Now, you can do this with the dumbbells, or you can do this with an easy bar curl like this. It doesn't really matter. Again, it's ultimately preference for yourself. What differs between this tricep movement and the other ones we've done so far is this one brings my elbow in front of the body. The only major cues I want you to be aware of this is to make sure that the elbows are in a static position, meaning there's no movement from the elbow up, and that the only moving point of the body is the forearms down towards the head. And the second one, a no-brainer, literally if you smack yourself in the face, you will have no brain, is try not to actually turn a skull crusher into a crushing skull exercise. So just to recap what we did today, we've introduced 2 compound lifts for the chest, one being an incline press, one being a flat press. We then did 1 shoulder compound, but we supplemented that with 2 isolations hitting both the lateral and the posterior head of the shoulder, sharing the load amongst the deltoids. We then hit triceps, but we manipulated the elbow with every single movement. On the tricep dips, the elbow was flaring behind the body. On the tricep extensions via the cable, the elbow was beside the body. And with the skull crushers, the elbows were in front of the body. If you want this workout completely for free, drop me a line over on Instagram and I'll bash it over to you for free. Sound, good luck.